It's just past 6 in the morning, and the sky over Main Street is still more gray than blue. One light is already on. It has been on for hours. Steam fogs the window from the inside, and through the fog you can just make out the shape of a big coffee urn bubbling quietly behind the counter. The sign above the door hasn't been switched off yet. Neon, pink and blue, buzzing faintly in the cold morning air. It says simply, "Open." Push open that door, and a small bell rings above your head. Warm air rushes out to meet you. Bacon grease, fresh coffee, something sweet baking in the back. A dozen chrome stools line the counter, bolted to a floor of black and white tile, worn smooth in the places where 1,000 pairs of shoes have shuffled up to order. Nobody looks up when you walk in. They don't have to. Because in 1962, everybody already knows this place, and in the next 20 minutes, so will you. We're not going to explain the history of the American diner. We're going to sit down at the counter, order a cup of coffee, and find out what an ordinary day here actually felt like. The counter is the heart of everything. 12 stools, chrome and red vinyl, spinning just slightly if you nudge them the wrong way. Every regular has one they think of as theirs, even though nobody's name is written anywhere. Behind the counter, a woman in a pale uniform and a small white cap is already moving. She doesn't ask most people what they want. She already knows. Coffee black for the man in the work boots by the register. Coffee with...
At the end of the counter, bolted down where two stools meet, sits a small chrome box with rows of tiny cardboard tabs, each one a different song. Drop in a coin, press a button, and somewhere across the room a jukebox picks up the request without anyone having to leave their seat. The menu isn't really a menu. It's a board on the wall, hand-lettered, unchanged for years. Eggs, any style. Coffee, with refills nobody bothers to count. And somewhere near the bottom, one line that changes every single day. Today's special. That's the blue plate. A meat, a couple of vegetables, a starch, portioned onto one plate before the rush even starts, so it can hit the counter almost before you've finished asking for it. Meatloaf might be Tuesdays. Fried chicken might be Thursdays. Regulars don't need to ask. They already know what day it is by what's on the plate. Out front, the cars tell you exactly what decade you're in. Long, low, and heavy with chrome, they nose up to the curb at careless angles, engines still ticking as they cool in the morning air. Inside, nobody is in a hurry. That's the strange part. In a country that is about to spend the rest of the century moving faster and faster, this room, for a few minutes each morning, simply doesn't. By 7:30, the stools are nearly full. Work boots, pressed shirts, a trucker still wearing his jacket from the cold cab of his rig. Nobody's checked a menu in years. They just say a name, or sometimes nothing at all, and the coffee starts pouring before they've finished sitting down. To understand why this room feels the way it does, you have to go back much further than 1962. Long before there was a stool to sit on, there was a wagon.
In 1872, a young man named Walter Scott, who worked nights setting type for a Providence, Rhode Island newspaper, noticed something simple. The men who worked the late shift at his paper, and at every other paper in town, had nowhere to eat once the sun went down. Every ordinary restaurant in the city closed by 8. So Scott fitted out an old freight wagon, hitched it to a horse, and parked it outside the newspaper office. From dusk until 4 in the morning, he sold coffee, sandwiches, boiled eggs, and slices of pie, right out the side of that wagon, to men who had nowhere else to go. He wasn't trying to invent anything. He was just trying to feed people at the 1 hour of the day when nobody else would. Other cities noticed. Within 20 years, wagons like his were parked on street corners from Massachusetts to New York, some of them fitted with actual windows, some with a narrow counter where a customer could finally sit instead of eating standing on the curb. Eventually, those wagons stopped moving altogether. Companies began building entire dining cars, modeled quite literally on the railroad cars of the era, in factories hundreds of miles away, then shipping them, fully built, straight to their final location on the back of a truck or a rail flat car. That's the part almost nobody remembers when they look at a place like this one. A diner was never built where it stands. It arrived. And that single fact explains almost everything about the shape of the room you're sitting in right now. Long, narrow, low to the ground. Not because anyone thought that looked charming, but because that was the shape that fit on a truck.
By the time you're sitting at this counter in 1962, that traveling wagon has become something its builders probably never imagined. Not simply a place to eat, but one of the only rooms in an American town that belongs to absolutely everybody, equally, at the same time. The banker and the mechanic sit on stools 6 inches apart. Nobody checks whose turn it is. Nobody reserves a seat, because there mostly aren't any to reserve. That's not an accident. It's the entire design. The counter puts everyone at the same height, facing the same direction, elbow to elbow. There's no head of the table here, because there's barely a table at all. Just one long, unbroken line of stools, and a woman with a coffee pot who treats the man who owns the hardware store exactly the same way she treats the teenager skipping the last class of the day. That's the real difference between this room and a restaurant. It was never really about the food. It's about the total absence of a seating chart. It's worth being honest here, because this channel doesn't deal in nostalgia that isn't true. That open-door feeling wasn't universal everywhere in the country in 1962. In parts of the segregated South, that same welcoming counter could be a closed door to someone else entirely, depending only on the color of their skin. The diner's warmth was real for millions of people. Its unevenness was real too. Both belong in the honest version of this story. Still, for an enormous number of ordinary mornings, in an enormous number of ordinary towns, this small, loud... By mid-morning, the counter has already told a dozen small stories, if you know how to read it. There's the trucker in the third stool from the door, the one who pulled off the highway 40 minutes ago and will be back on it in 20. He orders the same thing every time he passes through, and it's usually in front of him before he's fully settled onto the stool. They don't talk much, him and the waitress. They don't need to. There's the 2 teenagers by the window, sharing a single milkshake with 2 straws, because that's what their pooled coins can afford, and because sharing one milkshake is, at 15, basically the entire point of coming here in the first place. There's the woman who arrives every day at 11, orders pie and coffee, and reads 3 chapters of a library book before walking home. Nobody at the counter knows her last name. Everybody at the counter would notice, immediately, if she stopped coming. And there's the waitress herself, the one who somehow keeps 100 different orders straight without writing most of them down, who knows which regular just had a new baby and which one just lost a job at the mill, who has quietly become, without any of them fully realizing it, the person holding an entire town's small talk together, one refill at a time. This is the part most history books skip completely. The diner isn't interesting because of the chrome, or the neon sign buzzing out front, or the malt machine humming behind the counter. It's interesting because for a couple of decades in the middle of the 20th century, it was one of the only rooms in America where a total stranger could sit down, in almost any town on almost any road, and immediately belong. Around noon, the rhythm changes completely. The lunch rush hits fast and hard, an hour exactly, because that's all most people get. Office clerks, shop owners closing up for 30 minutes, a mechanic in stained coveralls who doesn't bother changing before he sits down. The blue plate special disappears off the steam table in waves. Nobody lingers. Nobody has to be told to hurry. The whole room simply moves faster together, like it's rehearsed. By 2 o'clock, it's nearly silent again. Just the hum of the coffee urn and maybe 1 or 2 regulars nursing a cup long after it's gone cold, in no rush to be anywhere else. The short-order cook has been standing at the same grill since before the doors opened, visible through a narrow pass-through window, flipping eggs and pressing burgers with the same 3 motions he's used for years. Customers rarely see his whole face. They know his cooking better than they know him. That's the pattern, actually, for almost everyone who works this room. The people who make a diner feel like home are most of the time working with their backs half-turned, their hands full, their faces half-hidden behind steam and smoke. And somehow, that's exactly what makes the room feel honest instead of performed. Dinner brings a different crowd. Families mostly, after the men come home from the shift. A father still in his work clothes, kids fighting over who gets to drop the coin in the jukebox selector, a mother who didn't feel like cooking tonight and isn't the least bit sorry about it. And late at night, after most of the town has gone dark, the diner is often one of the only lit windows left on the whole street, doing exactly what Walter Scott's wagon did back in 1872, feeding the people the rest of the town has already forgotten are still awake. Nothing this ordinary disappears without anyone noticing, but it also doesn't disappear all at once. By the early 1960s, something is already quietly changing, just out of frame. A few miles outside of town, a new kind of restaurant has started appearing along the main road. No counter, no stools bolted to the floor, no waitress who already knows your order before you sit down. Instead, a short, fixed menu, a window you don't even have to leave your car to reach, and a promise, printed right there on the sign, that your food will be ready in under a minute. It doesn't look like competition yet. It looks like a novelty. But it's built around a completely different idea, not belonging, speed. At the same time, the roads themselves are changing, on a scale most people driving on them can't fully see yet. A few years earlier, the federal government had approved the largest public construction project in the country's history, a new interstate highway system, tens of thousands of miles of it, engineered to move cars around towns instead of through them. For generations, every road trip, every trucker's route, every family vacation had passed directly down a main street exactly like this one, right past a diner exactly like this one. In the years ahead, more and more of those cars will simply go around. The counter doesn't empty out all at once. Change like this rarely does. It empties out one stool at a time. A regular who used to stop by every single morning starts grabbing something faster on the way to work instead. A family that used to come in after church on Sundays finds it's quicker some weeks to just eat at home.
A trucker who used to swing through town every route finds a bigger, brighter stop closer to the new highway on-ramp and simply stops coming this way at all. Nobody makes an announcement. Nobody says the diner is over. It just very gradually becomes something fewer and fewer people actually do, and something more and more people simply remember. Most of the diners like this one are gone now. Some became parking lots. Some became fast food restaurants of their own, in a strange twist neither Walter Scott nor his customers could ever have predicted. A handful survive, restored, chrome-polished, more museum than meeting place, visited for nostalgia rather than for a Tuesday morning cup of coffee before work. But for a while, in small towns and along quiet highways across the country, this small room did something modern life still quietly misses. It didn't try to get you in and out quickly. It didn't sort you by how much you were about to spend. It simply gave you a stool, a cup of coffee that kept coming back whether you asked for it or not, and 20 minutes where the only thing expected of you was to sit there and be a person among other people. Maybe that's why, even now, so many people who never once sat on one of those stools still feel a small, specific kind of longing when they see a photograph of one. Not for the food, for the seat, for a version of an ordinary morning where slowing down wasn't something you had to schedule. It was simply how the day began.